Hello, ECON 2302 microecon students. This is another topic for Unit 2. Today we're going to be talking about time frames, short run versus long run. Some things may change or may not change depending upon the time frame that's involved. We also need to learn formulas for revenues, which we've learned before, but a couple of new ones, costs, profits, losses, and some rules for executing what we call optimization. For a single firm, that means maximizing profits where possible or minimizing losses where profits are not possible. So we're going to share that screen and we're going to take a look at the slideshow, which I'm going to narrate for y'all for a little while. Let us start with the short run. The short run is where about 65% of our firm's operations and analyses will take place. In the short run, the market supply curve looks like a standard upward sloping supply like we worked with in Unit 1. I want you to notice there's a formula here for total cost. It says TC, which stands for total cost, is equal to FC, which stands for fixed cost, and VC, which stands for variable cost. We'll go into those into a little more detail later on, but just I want you to understand that in the short run, some things are fixed to the firm and other things are variable. What cannot change in the short run? The number of firms in the market. No firms can enter, nor can they exit the market. The technological base of the industry, the available technology that can be used and implemented, being put into use, the production process is fixed. It cannot improve or change in the short run. The firm's physical size, some other words that mean that, scale of operation or plant scale, referring to the business's physical plant, which is all their buildings and surrounding land. That can't change. Certain contractual costs, meaning there's an actual contract with a supplier or an employee. Salaries are a contract. You agree to pay a certain amount per year to an employee. Insurance premiums, typically a one-year contract where you pay a monthly premium in exchange for coverage in the event of some kind of casualty, and rent, where there's a lease contract that governs that. Now, what can change? What is variable? The firm's quantity of output can change, as can their employment of labor, but notice it's within the limits of the firm's physical size. The firm could shut down and produce 0 units of output, or could produce the maximum amount possible. Similarly, the firm could shut down and hire 0 workers, or if based upon shifts and stations and spacing and whatnot, the maximum number of employees that could be employed is 150 employees. That's what they'll employ. If the thing is that the maximum output is 10,000 units a day, they're not going to produce 15,000 a day. It's physically not possible. If the maximum number of employees they could hire would be 150, they're not going to employ 200. It's not physically possible. Size limits this stuff. Certain costs that are actually tied to production. Hourly wage payments. The more you produce, the more you work your workers, the more your hourly wage payments are, and the opposite's true the less you produce. Raw materials, same thing. Those costs are higher when you produce more, they're less when you produce less, and utilities like water, natural gas, and electricity. More production means higher utility bills, less means lower utility bills. Please note the term I used was shut down. It is not exit the market. I'm going to say this emphatically. No firm can exit the market nor enter the market in the short run. However, certain conditions may prevail where the firm is better off, meaning it minimizes its losses by choosing to produce and sell nothing, meaning Q star, which stands for optimal output when you're talking about just one business, equals to 0 units. Q star, optimal output. Optimal means profit maximizing where possible, or loss minimizing where profits aren't possible. But when a firm shuts down, it doesn't disappear. It exists. The owners are still obligated to pay any costs that it has a contract to pay, like rent or insurance premiums. That does not go away. And I say it again, firms can neither enter nor exit the market in the short run. Not in the short run, they can't. Now, the long run, I want you to notice the supply curve is getting flatter. It's getting more price elastic. And notice that there's no FC mentioned here. All your long run total costs are variable. No costs are fixed in the short run. Reason why? In the long run, your contracts may be subject to external pressures, such as inflation, or they can be renegotiated. So rent could go up or go down. Salaries could go up or go down. Insurance premiums can rise or drop. Please notice, though, that the physical size of the business is also variable. Somebody that has 2 franchises for a fast food joint may open a couple more. Or if they have 2, they may close down one if it's not profitable. So the physical size or scale of operations or plant scale can increase or decrease in the long run. And please notice the number of firms in the market is now variable. Firms are free to enter the market or exit the market in the long run. I want to emphasize something. There's no shutdown in the long run. It's either remain in the market and produce, or it's exit the market. There is no shutdown in the long run. There is no shutdown in the long run. However, the technological base is fixed. Couple of quick comments. There's no absolute time measurement that constitutes short run or long run because different industries have different rates of technological evolution. They have different flexibilities in the ability to expand or contract. So for like a retail store, the short run may be 3 months to 6 months, but for an automobile company, it could be 1 model year. The long run for a retail store could be 3 calendar years. The long run for an automobile company could be 5 model years. Again, it varies by industry. It's just that you're in the long run when all the costs are variable and the firm is free to enter or exit the market, for example. You're in the short run if you can either shut down or produce but can't exit the market, and your size is fixed and nobody else can enter nor exit the market. So again, be aware of this. About 65% of our analysis is short run, about 35% is long run. Formulas that must be memorized by the student for revenues, costs, profits, and losses. We've already been introduced to total revenue in Unit 1. It's price per unit of output times number of units sold. Emphasis, sold, not produced. Total revenue is the total dollar income earned by the business, the firm, from producing and selling a certain amount of output. Now, we've already learned some marginals when we talked about consumer theory. We've got a lot more marginal formulas coming up. Marginal revenue is the next one. That is equal to the change in the total revenue divided by the change in the quantity of output. And notice we've got these J and J minus 1 subscripts again. We have tables. Problem number 4 on the handwritten homework and a couple of practice problems. Where if you're calculating something in a table, row J is the current row J minus 1 is one row previous. So if I'm calculating the marginal revenue of unit number 4, take total revenue in row 4, subtract total revenue in row 3, divided by quantity in row 4 minus quantity in row 3. Pay attention, students. Delta Q is not going to be 1 unit in these tables. Make sure you don't forget to evaluate that denominator. It is majorly important. Now, in words, marginal revenue means additional total revenue earned from producing and selling an additional unit of output. It's basically giving each unit of output's value added or contribution to revenue. So the thing is, if the 5th unit we sell adds $20 to our total revenue, that means the marginal revenue of the 5th unit equals $20.00. These formulas are the same, short run versus long run. In the long run, we'd have a bunch of LR subscripts for long run data. Now let's talk about costs. We're going to talk short run and long run for both of these. In the short run, some costs are fixed, which means they are independent of quantity of output, and some costs are variable, meaning they directly depend upon quantity of output. Question: if a firm shuts down and produces 0 units of output, what will the variable cost be equal to? If you said $0.00, you're correct. How about the fixed costs? Would they be equal to $0.00 when a firm shuts down? If you said no, you are correct. The fixed costs will not be $0.00 when a firm shuts down because they are a contractually obligated type of costs. These costs are independent of quantity of output. Even if you produce and sell nothing, you're obligated to pay them. Now, another approach, which is valid for both short and long run, is to say explicit plus implicit costs. Explicit costs are sometimes called accounting costs because you've got bills and invoices that show the explicit costs. These are things like paycheck stubs for the wages and salaries of workers, the canceled checks for paying rent and paying suppliers of raw materials, as well as utilities and water and everything. And somebody might say, well, that sounds like all of your costs of production. No, it's not. It's just the so-called accounting costs, because the other part of your total costs are your implicit costs. Implicit costs are real measurable costs of production to a business for which there are no invoices, but the owner or the operations managers are full well aware of them. Class, I have a friend of mine who owns and operates a restaurant, but one time he was talking about the fact that he was having to compare his profits versus how much money he'd make if he was working for somebody else and not having to run the business. Think about it. He's not working for somebody else. He's not getting that salary being a chef for somebody else. What kind of a cost would that be using Unit 1 terminology? If you said opportunity cost, exactly. The opportunity cost to the business owner of being an entrepreneur is the implicit costs, and those don't go away. Thing is, in the short run, some explicit costs are fixed, some are variable. The implicit costs are strictly fixed in the short run. These aren't the only cost formulas you need to know about. There's more. Average variable cost is simply the per unit variable cost of production. Take variable cost divided by the number of units produced. That's going to equal to the average variable cost. So if my variable costs are $1,500 when I produce 100 units, the average variable cost would be $1.50 per unit. Okay, no, I take that back. 1,500 divided by 100. No, it is $1.50 per unit. Excuse me. Having a brain fart today, students. I apologize. But all that is the per unit variable cost of production. We use average variable cost to determine if a firm produces or shuts down because it tells us when the revenue is big enough to cover the variable costs or not. Average total cost is the average per unit cost of production. If a business produces 100 units, its fixed costs are $1,000 and its variable costs are $1,500. The total cost will be $1,000 plus $1,500, which is $2,500. When it produces 100 units, if the total cost is $2,500, 2,500 divided by 100 is equal to $2.50 per unit. Please notice that costs and revenues are measured in dollars and cents. They don't just have generic numbers, they're measured in currency. So the thing is, this tells me, on the average, for 100 units, it costs the business $2.50 to produce one single unit. These averages change when output increases or decreases for both average variable and average total because they are tied to the number of units of output. Marginal cost is equal to additional total cost from producing and selling an additional unit of output. It's equal to the change in the total cost divided by the change in the quantity of output, and this is one that goes in all the tables. In fact, total cost, average variable, average total, and marginal cost are calculated in all those tables we're going to be working. Take the total cost in row J, subtract total cost in row J minus 1, divide by the difference between the quantity in row J minus the quantity in row J minus 1. Again, be careful. Delta Q will not be 1 unit. Make sure you evaluate those denominators. Now, marginal cost has got a special property, and this is referring to tables here. If you have an MC column in a table, like you will for practice problems 3 and 4, or problem 4 in the Unit 2 homework, where the values of MC are getting bigger, they're increasing as quantity of output increases, and the values are greater than the smallest or minimum average variable cost curve, just those values, just those rows and their associated quantities will be the individual business's short-run supply curve. It's going to be important to highlight those rows that have the increasing MC that's bigger than minimum average variable cost. Very important, because you need to be able to figure out optimal output, and the business will not choose any output that's not on the business's short-run supply curve. So this is something important. All these formulas matter. Now, the long run cost formulas. All costs are variable in the long run, but we still have explicit and implicit costs in the long run. It's just that none of them are fixed. We have a long run average cost formula that is both long run average variable and long run average total cost. And that's simply long run total cost divided by long run quantity of output. And there's also a long run marginal cost, which is change in long run total cost divided by change in long run quantity of output. We're not going to be dealing with tables for the long run. We're going to be dealing strictly with graphs, but these formulas still matter when you deal with them. They still matter. Now you might say, well, what makes the long run so different from the short run? And that is that the short run, all these cost formulas here for the short run are based upon a fixed size or plant scale to the business. Remember, in the short run, the size of the business is fixed. But in the long run, you've got greater variability in both of these values because the firm can increase or reduce its physical size. All righty. Now, the profit loss formula, which was mentioned in Unit 1, is now formalized. Total revenue minus total cost is equal to the profit loss formula. And this formula is the same whether you're talking short run or long run. Profits and losses, just like costs and revenues, are always measured in dollars and cents. Class total cost, variable costs, all those things are positive values. They're going to be in gray pencil or black pen. Revenues are positive values. They are in gray pencil or black pen. Profits are going to be positive cash values too, and they will be in black pen or gray pencil. But losses are negative cash values. Here you would use red ink, round parentheses, and no, I repeat, no minus sign. The red ink round parentheses tells you it's negative. Now, we break down, and by the way, that's the Greek letter pi, but this is not geometry. It's not 3.1415 yada yada. In economics speak, the Greek letter pi means one thing, and that is profit or loss. And here's the different profits and losses you need to know about. First of all, if you've taken an accounting, this is how accountants define profits. Take the total revenue, subtract the explicit cost. If the difference is positive, you have an accounting profit. So basically all of the accounting costs, all of the explicit costs are covered, but the thing is, this is not the best a business can do. Remember, explicit costs do not include the shadow costs, the implicit, which includes the opportunity cost of entrepreneurship. An economic loss, negative pi is a symbol I use for that, is when total revenue minus total cost produces negative cash flow. I want y'all to understand a business could make an accounting profit and yet make an economic loss. A good friend of mine who was a part owner of a restaurant for a number of years basically exited the market after the restaurant was profitable, but not profitable enough. One of the things that he told me was, Hank, we're doing well. We're paying our bills. We're paying ourselves. We're paying our suppliers. And we have some money left over. But the amount of money left over versus what we're being put through is just not worth it. And after operating for about 18 months, they closed that restaurant and exited the market. And he went to go work for somebody else and was a lot happier. They had an accounting profit, but based upon valuing the time he was putting into there and then what he was sacrificing to run that business, he said the profits weren't enough. What he was saying was his total revenue covered his explicit costs, but did not cover his total cost because the implicit, the opportunity costs were not covered. A normal profit, I don't like to use the word break even here, but this is where we truly break even. It's where total revenue minus total cost is exactly $0.00. Of course, then some student says, well, that means they make no money. How's the entrepreneur going to live? I turn your attention back to the explicit cost. And I'm going to say something right now. The personal salary of the entrepreneur is an explicit cost. And remember, since entrepreneurs call themselves self-employed, they're going to have to pay themselves money to live before they can afford to hire anybody else. They're not going to pay their employees and not pay themselves. They're not going to pay their suppliers and not pay themselves. That is silly. That is ludicrous. That's crazy. The entrepreneur's personal salary is included in the explicit costs. They may pay themselves more out of their profits, but the thing is their personal salary to live on is included here. So no, they have paid themselves. What has happened here with a normal profit is they've earned enough revenue to cover all of their bills, including their personal salary, but they've also earned enough to exactly cover their implicit costs as well, right down to the penny. This is the level of profit that is good enough for the owner to want to keep the business going in perpetuity. Now, an economic profit is a pie with no adornments, no accoutrement. Okay, we got the N for normal profit, the negative for loss, the ACT for accounting. Pi by itself is economic profit. That's where total revenue minus total cost produces positive cash flow rather than zero. When we have this kind of a situation, businesses are going to be very, very happy, but they may decide to expand, or it may attract more competition and drive prices down. The usual experience for most businesses is they're going to experience economic losses or economic profits in the short run. But in the long run, they're going to either exit the market or experience a normal profit. I'm saying this is a typical experience. There are exceptions, obviously, but this is what's typically experienced. So be aware of the different kinds of profits and losses. We're going to be dealing primarily with these three in Unit 2. We're going to be dealing with the accounting profit in Unit 3. So this will be revisited later. Couple of notes about formatting to be aware of. Costs, revenues, and profits are all positive cash flows. I say it again, measured in dollars and cents. Any tables you fill in with them must be in black ink or gray pencil. Dollars are on the left, 2 decimal places, round to the nearest second decimal, or whole dollars with 2 zeros on the end. If you don't format the numbers, it's wrong. Regardless of what the numbers say, the formatting is part of the answer. Economic losses are the only thing that we do in red ink with red round parentheses. If you see negative pi equals, and notice negative pi is black and so is the equals, but then red round parentheses, $300.00, red round parentheses, that denotes a $300 economic loss. Only the negative cash is in red ink with red round parentheses. Everything else is in black ink or gray pencil. Pay attention to formatting. Another little reminder, Q star means optimal quantity of output to the single business, because we're dealing with single firms here. And P star means optimal price if the firm is not under perfect competition. Market equilibrium price is what P star means if you're dealing with a firm that is under perfect competition. Remember, perfect competition firms, no choice in the price, are at the mercy of market equilibrium. Monopolies, oligopolies, monopolistic competition have some power to choose their price. Now we've got two rules that you're going to have to use both with tables and with graphs. The first rule is called the short run shutdown rule. This must be committed to memory and understood. A firm in any market structure will choose to shut down, meaning optimal quantity of output is 0 units in the short run, if and only if P star is strictly less than the minimum average variable cost. Otherwise, meaning P star is either greater than or equal to minimum ABC, the firm will produce a positive quantity. Class, the reason for this is actually fairly simple. If the price is less than the minimum average variable cost and the firm produces a positive quantity, their revenue will not cover their variable costs. But remember, in the short run, they also have fixed costs. So if they produce when price is less than min ABC, the firm's revenue will lead to a loss that is greater than fixed costs. If that's the case, you better just shut down. No variable costs, no revenue, but you end up losing just the fixed costs. It's better to lose the fixed costs when price is that low. But once price is equal to or greater than minimum ABC, the firm's total revenue will cover their variable costs and then some. And so in other words, the losses, if there is one, would be smaller than the fixed costs, or there may be a normal profit or an economic profit. And so that's the logic behind it, is you only produce once your revenue is enough to, at bare minimum, cover the variable costs or cover the variable costs and more. And so that's where this comes from. This is only shut down. In the long run, it's either stay in the market or exit the market. But in the short run, and that's where most of our work is going to be, short run, this is our rule. Now, this next rule is contingent on the firm producing. This next rule I'm about to introduce cannot be used when the firm shuts down. When the firm shuts down, Q star is equal to 0 units, total revenue is equal to $0, total costs equals fixed costs, and negative pi is equal to a negative cash flow that matches fixed costs. But if the firm is producing, we have general optimization rule. Notice, if the firm chooses to produce in the short run, the firm will produce Q star units at price P star with both corresponding to marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. Please also remember those Q stars will have to be on the short run supply curve, which is the MC values that increase as Q increases and are bigger than minimum average variable cost. But again, Q star is chosen at price P star corresponding to MR equal to MC. We will be using this rule and the other rule I mentioned, the short run shutdown rule, on graphs and on tables. And tables will be the next thing we'll be working after this particular video. Now, please note perfect competition, and the two tables we're going to be working in the practice set are perfect competition. We will only be working tables for perfect competition, in fact. But the variations for perfect competition simplify the problems somewhat. P star is market equilibrium price. The firm has no choice of price. For perfect competition, marginal revenue is exactly equal to equilibrium price. If it's not perfect competition, the marginal revenue will be less than the equilibrium price or the optimal price. But for perfect competition, it's exactly equal to equilibrium price. That is only true for perfect competition. And then last but not least, if the firm is producing for general optimization rule, it will only choose Q star because P star has already been determined by the market supply and demand. Now, this one here is more for the graphs. The long run decisions. A firm will choose to stay in the market in the long run as long as the long run P star is greater than or equal to minimum long run average total cost. If P star in the long run is strictly less than minimum LRAC, the firm will exit the market in the long run. We will deal with this with graphs, not tables. Okay? Please make sure that you understand these formulas and know these two rules about the short run shutdown rule, the general optimization rule, and how it applies under perfect competition. Our next video will be working with some of those tables, or at least one of those tables as an exemplar. Okay, so, and we're going to stop screen sharing. All righty. Folks, this is not hard stuff. There's just a lot of time that gets put into working with these formulas. We're going to work in the next video, Unit 2, Practice Problem 3. I'm going to talk about how the entries are filled and then how to apply those rules. But right now, this video is an overview of time frames, costs, revenues, profits, losses, and some rules you have to enforce or work with when you deal with firms' analyses. Have a good day, everybody, and thank you very much.